potatoes, it's Fidalgo Democrats. And Barbara Cooper made the coffee for you. And Rita Sullivan made the cookies. Rita's not here yet, but she'll be in here. The slideshow was created by John Jansen, who's a retired photographer who's been helping us out. It's just wonderful. And it was presented by Zane Butler. Thank you, Zane. And what it was the Nobody is Above the Law rally, which we held here in Anacortes November 8th, right after Trump fired Jeff Sessions. And there were about 1,000 of such rallies all over the country. And we may need to do it again. We'll stay tuned and see what happens. And then I want to introduce public officials. Will Reichert is here, the sheriff. I think that's our only one.
For a few more days, a couple weeks.
Yeah, he's the outgoing sheriff. And then I'll introduce our speakers. Oh, come on up. And Chris, sit at the table. Because I think you'll probably speak one at a time.
Yeah, I'll try not to speak with her.
Okay, so I think Irene will be first. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Irene Morgan. She lives in rural Whatcom County. She's the founder of Restorative Community Coalition, which is a group. She was here 3 years ago and spoke about this 3 years ago, but it's going to be a little different this time. Last time we called the talk Ending Mass Incarceration. And since it hasn't ended, we're calling it Understanding Mass Incarceration this time. Irene is a counselor and psychotherapist in Bellingham. And then Joy Gilfillan is former president of the coalition, not now. She's a businesswoman in Whatcom County. She also lives in rural Whatcom County. And then the third speaker, would you come up too, please, Chris? Is Reverend Chris Hoke. That's H-O-K-E. I think you live in La Conner, is that right?
I live in Mount Vernon, and I'm not very reverend.
So don't call you Reverend. Call you Chris?
Yeah, I'm just Chris.
Chris from Mount Vernon. And I have a lot more words for him about him. He's worked closely with Skagit Valley gang members and prisoners throughout the state as a chaplain, pastor, and organizer. He's done this for 13 years. He founded Underground Coffee in 2009 to offer jobs to those leaving addiction and incarceration. He released his memoir, Wanted, in 2015. Patty back there just finished reading it for the second time this afternoon between 12 and 6. Chris founded Underground Ministries in 2017 to open new relationships to prisoners and community. So I believe Irene is going to speak first. And you can either speak over here or at the table. If it's at the table, we like you to stand because some are hard of hearing and read lips, like me.
Can you explain what the format is? Do you want us to speak like 5 minutes each and then we're going to come back and do the panel, or what is the, just so I have a sense?
We had mine each speak until you're done, and then...
I know what you got.
20 minutes each, and then we'll have, and then I'll try to moderate the discussion, and we'll have questions and comments after all three have spoken. Yeah, you're right, I should have said that.
Yeah.
I'm going to get my notes.
You have notes too?
I wrote down the questions that Colleen emailed to me. I'm Irene Morgan. I started what was originally entitled the Reentry Coalition of Whatcom County in 2006, just a few days short of 13 years ago. It was a cold wintering day in December 2006, and I had been going to a group of people, the Homeless Coalition in Bellingham, and I don't know why, but I've always known prison and jail didn't work. It was a gut feeling. And so I started the coalition, and the first meeting we had, there were 14 of us, and 4 of those people were DOC people. Charlie Wind was one of them. He was the DOC officer in Bellingham at the time, and one of our members was also DOC officer. And 2 women drove up from Olympia to be there. And when I saw those 4 DOC people there, I thought, we struck a chord. I don't know what chord it is, but this is important. So, and we were the first reentry coalition in the state, and we have not grown and done the things that I expected. When I first started researching, Delancey Street came on my radar. They're in San Francisco. Anybody know Delancey Street? They're an awesome facility and group. Meany Silbert started 40 plus years ago, and they have like an 85% success rate of people. They have housing, they have education and employment, and people leave there. It's a 2-year program. They leave there fully skilled and ready to go to work and be functional citizens. So that's what I envisioned for Whatcom County. And I named our facility the Restore Life Center. And I expected the Restore Life Center to be up and running a long time ago. But we've been so busy delving into what makes the system work. And everyone we've ever talked to, whether it's police or judges, prosecutors, clerks in the county courthouse, people have been through the system, they all know the system is broken. Everyone says so. They say the system is broken, but no one knows how to fix it. Well, we've said for a long time, we have solutions and we know what works. I'm a counselor. I work with the folks that go through the court system, and it's amazing to see how traumatized these folks are. And what we've realized recently is, not recently, but we've been able to prove it more and more, that the system actually causes most of the trauma. Yes, people are traumatized before they go through, but the shock of going through and being having all of most of their ideas about who we are as a nation and as a people are skewed and shattered. So I'm going to let Joy talk more about that. But one of the questions that Colleen asked me was how many families are affected? And we've just heard new statistics that have just come out, and 50% of all of our population either has or knows someone that has been incarcerated to some degree, either prison or jail. So that's half of us. And that's pretty astonishing for me. We thought for a while it was a third, but new statistics have come out. And then what is the cost to taxpayers? It's just enormous. And I'm going to let Joy talk about the figures because she has them memorized and I don't. They're astounding. And this is why we do this work, is because most people, unless they're involved in the system as an inmate or the family member of an inmate, or even people in the system themselves working for the government, don't realize, I believe, to the degree how the person is affected going through our incarceration system. The cost to the taxpayers in Whatcom County, we don't even know anymore how much of our county budget goes to incarceration anymore, because it's not configured the same way. You have to hunt and you don't always know where, what little pocket of money goes where anymore. But when we first started, 2011 I believe it was, our then county executive said that it was 78% of our budget went to our justice system, and that was $1 million a week. So it was pretty significant. And why we incarcerate people, I believe, is a Band-Aid. Like I said, I'm a therapist, so I see people from a different lens. And I served on the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force for 2 years. Our county decided that they wanted to see how we could reduce our jail population instead of, well they had we as citizens in Whatcom County defeated 2 jail sales tax, 0.2%. We defeated them twice. And we decided we wanted to do more in the way of prevention and helping people before they went to jail or after they came out, and help them get the jobs they need to be functional citizens or to be able to manage their mental health issues or whatever else is going on in their life. So what we can do is astronomical to help folks, and the way to help us get the best return on our dollar is to help them before they go into jail or prison, and jail, of course. And I'm not going to go into any of the statistics because Joy's going to do all of that. But it's I have just started. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I've been snooping around. I've been in nonprofits for 30 years, and I've been in and out of the courthouse and our courtrooms for at least 20 years. And as I see folks come in, there's very seldom, I'll bet not 1% of the people that come into the courtroom come in with their shoulders straight and their head held high and go up to the judge or to their spot and speak clearly and with gusto. And mostly they're slumped over. Many of them have hoodies on, trying to hide their face. They're obviously the lower economical group. And I don't know the percentage, but many of them have drug issues. Many of them, I can't tell you the FTA is a failures to appear. One guy says, why should I go to court and be fined again and not be able to pay that fine either? And he says, I've already lost my driver's license. He says, why would I show up to be fined again? So, and of course, I listen to the dialogue that goes on in the courtroom, and they're known as losers, and I'm sure they are, in many instances they are losers, but these folks, I have realized, need help. I see people go into court and the judge speaks to them politely and kindly and all of that, but not everything connects, not everything computes. And what I've realized, and I know several people actually who get physically ill just coming into the courthouse because they're going into the courtroom again. The continuances are astounding. And a continuance is because someone's not ready. And I don't want to point fingers, but it seems to be one side more than the other. I see you shaking your head.
You're right.
Yeah. And so these folks are traumatized, and when you're traumatized, you don't take information in like you would if you're not. And so I've realized that folks need help. So I started a court navigators training, and the folks that have gone through it with us, we just went to court the 3rd time now in just a couple of weeks. And as long as I've been going, I still hear terms that I've never heard before, still see things that I don't understand, and so I keep this running list, and every time I have a defender or a judge or a probation person that I can ask, I ask those questions so that I can be more educated myself. It's so confusing and complicated and convoluted. So I'm not at all surprised that these folks have trouble understanding what's happening to them. And I also know that paperwork doesn't always go out on time. And so just because the courthouse has actually sent a letter out doesn't mean that it's been delivered the way it should be. So if the person doesn't know they have a court appointment, they're FTA, they're failure to appear. So there's a warrant put out for their arrest. So if they are stopped for a speeding violation, or I know people that have been actually stopped on the street, walking on the street, and been arrested. So I know that doesn't happen often, but it can. And so then they're rearrested, they go to jail on this warrant, and or if they finally know that there's a warrant out for their arrest, they can go in and have it quashed. But they have to be careful not to go to a jurisdiction that also has a warrant out for them, or another jurisdiction could have a warrant out for them, and the judge then has to arrest them because they haven't quashed the warrant in another jurisdiction. It is so convoluted, and these folks are scared to death. So we are in Whatcom County, and I haven't been able to find anywhere else where this is happening. So I hope to be able to spread this one so that people can actually be helped going through the system. And I believe when we can do that, people will not end up going back to jail, and it's one way of keeping people out of the system. So I think that's about all I need to talk about now. Thank you so much. Thank you for this invitation.
Joy, next.
I want you to use this mic. But I'm not happy with that microphone. If I'm not happy, I'm going to be cranky.
I don't want you to be cranky. You've already threatened to take your clothes off so that it's cooler in here. And a cranky person with her clothes off is not a good thing. So my name is Joy Gilfil, and I'm past president of the Restorative Community Coalition in Whatcom County, and I've been doing the work for 9 years, 100% volunteer. And that's just crazy. I've never spent 9 years doing anything in my life. I spend about 2 years in any particular industry, in any particular job. The reason is because I go in, I'm a trailblazer, and I go into situations, I figure out the problem, I solve the problem, I teach the boss how to change the problem so that it can be fixed, and I move on. And I've done it in the medical optics industry, I've done it in the organic foods industry, I've done it in publishing, I've done it in different career fields. And I was getting ready a few years ago to publish a book called, or publish and market a movie I just made called Flipping the Joy Switch. And it's about how do you actually switch a mindset from being negative or addictive or abusive to being productive. Like, what's the difference between a high performance person and an underperforming person? And I had learned that there's actually a little switch in the back of your head, and there's changes that happen in your body chemistry that allow you to become progressive or constricted. And this affects athletes, it affects business people, it's actually a success thing. So I was going along on that, and I was bringing my movie out, and somebody that I met in the steam room said, you know, Joy, I think you ought to come. Let me tell you who he was. He's a corporate headhunter for corporate executives, top Fortune 500 level corporate executive recruiter. And he said, you know, Joy, he says, I think you ought to come to our Reentry Coalition meeting this weekend. He says, I think it would be very interesting for you. And he's a corporate executive. I'm going to sell my tools to corporate executives. It would be terrific to go meet corporate executives at this thing, and maybe I'd get funding, and maybe I'd get speaking engagements, and maybe I'd get all these things. I said, nah, I'm going to Canada. I've got a vacation. I won't be coming. And he said, well, if you change your mind, show up. Well, things didn't pan out in Victoria quite the way I went. And I went, God, this guy's a corporate recruiter. Why am I not? I'll go home. So I go home and I knock on the door of his place where they're having this retreat. And Irene Morgan opens the door. I've known her for 15 years. She's this weird person who always pulls people out of the ditch, helping everybody. What am I coming to a corporate retreat to talk to her for? And I said, what am I doing here? And she says, I don't know, what are you doing? And I said, well, what's this coalition about? And she says, it's helping people re-enter society after they got bucked out from an arrest. And I went, clearly, I have no idea why I'm here, but I'll come in because I drove back from Victoria to do it. Long story short, I got mad in about an hour. Because as a corporate person and a trainer of human potential, and a person who has already changed 3 different industries and turned them around and understand that in small business and free enterprise and corporate business, our American society is under a huge load. We've got so many problems. What in the world are we doing building a private? I had no idea that when I had voted for the privatization of prisons back in the 70s and 80s and when I was in politics, that I had created a monster, that I had been part of the development of what I'm today calling the privateering industry, which is actually a predatory prey business model that uses prisoners as bait to acquire tax dollars so that we can continue to build a military-industrial complex. The entire system is an abuse system, and it's an addiction by governments that have done business with private companies who are quasi-corporate companies. They're national, multinational corporations, and they are consuming our youth. And I'm sorry, but it's taken me 9 years to diagram it. And it's really sick. And the outgrowth of the abuse pattern, it's a tax addiction pattern. The outgrowth of that, the symptom, is exactly what you guys were protesting on the wall up here, the Trump problem. That constitutional crisis that we're dealing with at the top end of our government right now is a constitutional law problem, and it goes back to the attorney generals, it goes back to the control by the Supreme Court and by the law of our entire country. And it's gotten itself tied up in a great big tangle of knots. But the thing that's interesting is the problem we have at the national level is the same problem we have at the state level, which is the same problem we have at the corporate level, our county corporation level, and it's the same problem we have in the streets. We have a monetary system that is out of whack. The law, according to our Constitution, is supposed to be managed by the lawmakers, by the judicial branch, and by the executive branch. And the problem is that when we corporatized America, when we corporatized government, we created an imbalance with the corporations, the government corporations, who now have turned law and justice into a business center because it makes more money to run the governments. So that's the heavy conversation, but a couple of you sounded like you actually wanted to know that kind of thing, so I went into it. That's all that I'm going to talk about from the large system, because what I want to do is I want to show how it is that we can, you can hold this up. This is what I do when I start researching problems, and it took me a long time to draw this map. But this map actually shows how the master meta system is what they call it in systems theory. The meta system controls the micro systems. This is, in this little square right here, is exactly what happens to a person who gets arrested, and what happens to them in the first 72 hours, and how the emotional trauma that they sustain in that first 24 to 72 hours, being arrested and taken into the jail, absolutely blows their mind. And they become traumatized, they can't think straight. And it is so mind-blowing, that's all I need to show right now. I can put it in, so your hands can rest. But what happens is that the mind is blown, and this goes back to constitutional law. The mind is blown because we as Americans believe in freedom. It's our highest value. And we believe in the law, and we believe in the justice system, and we believe, because we were conditioned by all of our institutions, by the Pledge of Allegiance, by our Everything we got taught by all of our teachers is that you call 911 for safety. If you have a problem, you call 911. That's what I grew up with. But today, because of the way that we changed the 911 pattern, because of the way that we corporatized government, because of what happened in the 9/11. When 9/11 happened, the whole mentality of what happens in a 911 phone call is that not only are we, because of technology, calling the police, the protectors, we call our protectors to come for help. We think, like for example, I just did a study of 53 people who went through the law and justice system in Whatcom County in the last few years. And in that study, I met people who called the law, they called 911 to get help for their son who was having a medical emergency because they changed his drugs. He was on mental meds. They changed his drugs. He started to have an episode. So they were told to call 911, the people who they would help him, right? Well, at 911, when you have a person who's acting out, in Whatcom County at least, they send the cops. Well, if you send a cop to somebody who's already paranoid, who's already having a mental breakdown, what's he gonna do? He's gonna act out. This guy ended up in the jail. He ends up with 3 felonies because he resists arrest. He doesn't wanna go. And that started this entire situation that started here. It was a safety call. A person was calling to get help for her son, told to do it by her medical provider, by the people who are the caregivers. And down the road, we end up with this guy eventually committing suicide. It was a horrible story, but that's one of 53. And by the time I listened to all of these 53 stories, and I'm not going to take a whole bunch more time here, but by the time I was done listening to the stories and diagramming the economics and understanding the political changes, I realized that we in America are really sitting in a really critical place right now. And we have an opportunity where we can change the future of the nation, but only if we understand that as local communities we can change the system. But in order to change the system, we have to understand the system. And in Whatcom County, I did a different kind of an analysis, and I figured out that the prosecutor, the sheriff, and the executive, in our case, I guess you guys have county commissioners down here, but the county sheriff, the county executive, and the prosecutor control the law. But they also control the budgets, and most people don't understand that because the prosecutor writes off and signs off on all of the transactions that happen because Whatcom County is a corporation and does business as a corporation. So we elect our representatives, but we hire them as corporate executives. And at one particular point when I went in to speak to the prosecutor over an issue, he wouldn't sue a multimillionaire businessman in the community because what he said was, I can't afford to sue him. If I lose, I've got a problem because he could sue us back. And he said, I can't sue this guy. The guy had committed felonies, 5 felonies. It was a white-collar crime, similar to what we got dealing with Trump. It's a white-collar crime. He wouldn't sue him because he said, I have to protect the corporation against lawsuits from the taxpayers. Think about that. We hire the law to protect us individually as taxpayers. They are hired by us. We elect them. And what I realized in that moment is the prosecutor had been placed in what's called a double bind. He had to protect the corporation against people who are bad guys. But if he protected the corporation that way, he was able to allow a rich guy to get away because it wasn't legal. You know, it's like there was just this whole snaggletooth problem. But the bottom line is, when we understand what we're dealing with, we can elect a different prosecutor. We can elect a different sheriff. We can elect a different county executive. We can elect people who actually are willing to learn why our country's in a problem, why our communities are going broke, why our budget in Whatcom County went up to 70% being spent on law and justice, when in the 80s we were at 55%. All of these things are big issues. The good news is it's small solutions and we can do it here. And Chris is a brilliant example. I've met him a few years ago. He's a brilliant example of how we can, in fact, make differences at the micro level. And each one of you, depending on who you elect and how you have your conversations, we will be able to change the nation and the direction in the next couple of years if we choose to learn. But it takes listening and opening our minds. That's all I want to say right now. Is that all right?
Good evening. Thanks for having us out. My name is Chris, and we have a really small organization called Underground Ministries. And our mission statement is, Underground Ministries opens new relationships. That's our goal. To open new relationships between open new relationships of embrace and trust between gang-affected prisoners and the communities to which they return for our mutual transformation and resurrection. And so we're a really relationship-focused organization, because that's my story, and that's what I've seen changes most people. That's what I've seen changes most people is relationships. I have 2 degrees, and I studied a lot of books, but the things that have shaped my mind and my behavior and my culture has always been relationships. The way I got involved with relationships with the underground of Skagit County, young gang members, medium-aged gang members, meth cooks, is going into the jail as a volunteer chaplain, doing Bible studies. I came up here when I was 23, and I wanted to study with a theologian who was kind of doing theology that was interesting to me in the jail. So I came up here to study head stuff. But what I didn't expect is that I would really, really like the people in the red scrubs and their toes sticking out of the orange slippers in a cold Skagit County jail Thursday nights and Sunday afternoons. I didn't know I was meeting face-to-face all the folks. Some of them, I didn't subscribe to the paper, but I'd learned over time, the faces that were there for a long time would come back week after week, month after month, over a year. Oh, these were the guys in the newspaper that were facing 1-2-year trials that were in the newspapers. But I didn't know the newspaper. I just knew these individuals, and it changed me, and I grew to like a lot of them. And some of them liked me back and invited me to be their pastor. And that was still a bad word for me. I was kind of over-churched and really. Was anyone over-churched here? Growing up? I was over-churched, so I went to the jail to study theology, because really far from my upbringing. But I didn't expect for guys with ink on their necks and their faces and on their hands to be really interested in what we're looking at in the gospel texts, that were very politically astute about how power works in a community, both at the top and the bottom. But I didn't expect that they wanted a pastor. I'm just like, no, I'm not a pastor. I want to be an activist theologian. They're like, I don't know what the F that is. You're a pastor, dog. And I started to embrace it. And I visited these guys night after night after night. And I experienced, it took me 5 or 6 years to use the F word, friendship, that I really started to like these guys. And I don't know if that breaks professional boundaries, but they were kind of my friends. And I'd go and visit them when they got out, because I wanted to continue this relationship, and maybe we would go to the co-op and get some coffee. But no, they were oftentimes back involved in forces I didn't understand, of broken homes and despair and addiction and belonging to gang violence. And I understood, they were my guides to the underground of Skagit County. They were my docents and my curators to understand a side of society I didn't know. But many of them didn't get out to the county. Many of them just disappeared to prison, and were in facilities in Cloud Bay, facilities in Walla Walla, Coyote Ridge, Monroe Correctional Complex, Shelby, Olympia Correctional Complex, and I was starting to get these letters with all sorts of acronyms in the upper left-hand corner from different facilities. And I started to stay in touch with a lot of them. I couldn't keep up with them, so I decided to stay in relationship rather than trying to have a program with helping a lot of folks. I just stayed in relationship with 1, 2, 3 of them at a time. And as I built that trust and understood what they went through in prison, and understood how hard it was coming home, I thought, hey, when you get out, give me a call and I'll get you a job. It was so hard. So I had to keep fundraising and try to work with nonprofits in Skagit County to give myself full time to walking with these guys. And it was hard enough to learn how the courts worked, how to squash warrants, how when they got out they need a driver's license to not be driving illegally to their job, but they can't get their driver's license without paying many different holds on collections that were growing at 12% compounding interest while they were incarcerated. So there's all this debt until they pay that off or start a payment plan. They can't get their license. but they can't pay those off until they get the job. So that's a common kind of chicken before the egg problem that I couldn't solve, and I'd gone to college. A lot of these guys hadn't solved, so they just go back to the underground. They go back to staying at friends' houses that were normally not the healthiest environments. They go back to making money the way that they could, selling drugs. And so I started to really despair about this underground. It wasn't just prison, where I started to understand prisons as warehouses, as landfills for human beings. But then when they came out, they were still in the underground. And it takes a lot of relationships and accompaniment to walk through good connections to landlords, good connections to employers, helping someone put their calendar together and go to appointments. But a lot of it was just relationship, of just knowing new people. So I want to talk more about what our organization is trying to do now in Skagit County and beyond. But I'm just talking from the outside. I'm really glad that our friend Cruz is here tonight. So I'm going to invite Cruz to come up and I'm going to ask him a few questions to share what it's like on the other side of that underground journey.
First of all, I want to say, Sheriff, I thought I recognized you. When I walked in, I'm glad it's here though, not somewhere else. It feels good to be out here. I'm a little nervous to be around you people. It's a different type of people that I'm used to. So if I'm not around my environment, I have anxiety. So, but coming out of prison, it's been a little hard for me. It was in prison where I found the real person that I was. Not being able to do the things I was doing out here was a little different for me. I learned how to be somebody that was productive, you know. And right at the point of me getting out, it was like a week before. I thought, damn, I have nothing. I have nothing. Everything I worked so hard in here for. DOC was forcing me to be at school, but they couldn't force me to go and learn. It was up to me, so I did my best. I did my best, but right to the point where it was time for me to get out, it was hard. I was like, I have nothing. I have nobody. I met Chris before I even went to prison, but I used to talk a lot of bad things about him. You know, we didn't really like him because of what he was trying to do. He was trying to get us out of the lifestyle. But he and my brother was able to pick me up from prison. They took me to go eat. We prayed, you know. And ever since then, that first day, I fell in love with him. Everything that he's been doing for me has just been great. You know, everywhere I go, and if he's by my side, I feel safe. You know, I don't feel rejected by anybody because they see him with me, and my brother. He also works with them. And I was at the sheriff's office the other day, and I was filling out some paperwork, and I expected the lady to be a little rude to me. You know, it was my first day out of prison, and she seen my brother, so she gave me a smile. She gave him a smile because she knew that he was with me and helping me. And right when it was about time for me to sign the paper, she brought the paper to him and not to me. So I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? You know, I'm the one that's needs to be signing that paper. And ever since then, I feel good when they're by my side. You know, so I think we need more people like Chris and you guys, you know, to do something about what's going on. And believe me, you guys don't even want to get me started about what I had to go through in prison. You know, I was forced to gangbang at the beginning. I left that lifestyle a long time ago. I was taking care of my kids. I fell victim to the opiate thing. It started off with prescriptions and then it went to heroin and that. But I went through a lot. Ever since I was in the back of that cop car, I knew my life was about to go through something that was even worse from doing drugs, stealing, gangbanging, and all that stuff. I knew that it was going to be, with what I have learned from other people that come out of prison, what goes inside that prison, it was going to be worse than what I was going through out here. And they were right. Right when we got to Shelton, on my first day, there was a fight inside the gym, and I was forced to run with the Hispanics. I was forced. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go anywhere else, you know. And I'm thinking, damn, I left this lifestyle a long time ago. I was just a drug user, you know, I don't want to do this no more, but I was forced to. And I mean, it was crazy, you know, from 6 in the morning till 8:45 at night. It was just fear, that's it. I would go to school, I feel sick inside of school. When I was working on my GED, I didn't know nothing about no school. I couldn't even pick up a book and read the title, because it would be like, whatever. I could read a book right now in less than 2 days.
Nice.
You know, but it's hard. It's hard. And I meet up with Chris all the time. We pray. He's been teaching me a lot of things, how to pray, how to talk to God, and it's been helping. You know. Other than that, I'm glad to be here today. You know, I can't even look up right now because that's how ashamed I am of the person that I was. You know, I'm learning how to dress differently. You know, I'm still learning. But I'm glad I don't have no tattoos on my face. I got some on my arms and chest and stuff. That's why I wear the sweater. But yeah, but I'm happy to be here though.
So Cruz is really nice to say nice things about me, but really it's just walking alongside someone, and it's really easy to love when you're close to someone. I don't know if anyone has like physically close proximity. Has anyone heard of Brian Stevenson? He wrote a book called Just Mercy. It's a really good book to pick up. He's a leader of the Equal Justice Initiative, and he's helped overturn many death row cases of life sentences, or capital punishment cases. And what he talks about as he tours the country is the 4 things that we need to build a movement. He says number 1 is proximity, the power of proximity. When you are close to an issue, and it's not just documentaries, they're not just pie graphs, but when you know someone, when you get close to it, it engages your whole being, it engages your whole life. It's not just waiting for a measure to come up. We sure need those measures. But when you get close to it, it affects us. And so it's something that we've been putting together, we're calling One Parish, One Prisoner. And one of the main gang leaders in Skagit County, I was in a relationship for years, and he came out and released me to my home. And his whole life started to change. When he came out, I thought he would work with our nonprofit that I thought was pretty edgy where I used to work. But we visited this tiny little Presbyterian church with only some retired folks. And afterwards, he's like, man, that shit was tight. I'm going back there next week. I was like, really? Why? I didn't get it. I thought he was joking. I thought he was maybe making fun of the church. Like, you really want to go back there? He's like, yeah, man. I'm like, why? He's like, it's safe. It's normal. They loved me. They heard about me before I came, so when I hit the door, they're like, are you? And they put their arms out and they hugged me. And I thought, any church can do that. Any small collection of people can do that. And then we went and spoke at a big Episcopalian church, and someone came out to me afterwards when there was like when my book came out. I was prepared for Q&As, and one of the most common questions was, what can we do? And I had no answer, really. Someone after the first 2 events said, ask them to sign up and join financially give. Maybe that can help. But after the second one, someone came up to me afterwards, she gave me this really rough printout thing, and she said, and it was called OPOP, One Parish, One Prisoner. And it said, roughly in Washington State, there's roughly the same amount of prisoners as churches. So just doing the math, what if every church, mega church, tiny church, embraced one person coming out of prison? I imagine, hey, maybe start writing letters 2 years before the gate, just build relationship, not a program, not a lot of resources, just building trust and relationship. Make some visits, go out. The whole church can start to care about this person and just embrace them. Walk through reentry. Most people probably have a used car. There's probably someone who knows the law in the congregation. There's probably someone that knows 1 or 2 employers who might be able to give them a chance. There's resources, but primarily there's relationship. So we started talking about this. Now we're working with the Washington State Department of Corrections. We're working with the Presbytery throughout Western Washington. We're working with the Seattle Archdiocese. We're trying to actually put those numbers together and what would be a training for some pilot parishes to embrace one person coming out. Michelle Alexander also wrote a book called The New Jim Crow a few years ago. Anyone heard of this book? And she, at the end of her talks, when she talks about the racial history of mass incarceration in America, 2.4 million people incarcerated, that she says the good thing is that there's some change. There's bipartisan support for this, and that's not common. There's actually bipartisan support for reforming the industry of mass incarceration. But even if we change the laws, what are we going to do with 2.4 million people coming home? They're going to go right back to the underground unless we have communities that go back, unless we have change. And so that's that mission statement, remember, of underground ministries are mutual transformation. It's not just about embracing people coming home from prison, but unless we as the community have a change of heart that say, we want you. We're not defending our communities from you, you are our community, and we want you. Because if we don't want them, then we just continue the human disposal system. So we need a change as well, and that happens in relationship. And so she says if we're going to welcome people home, we need to find a way to do this. And when slavery ended, it began with an underground railroad. A lot of us learned about that in grade school, right? It wasn't a real railroad. What was it?
It's a transport system.
Safe houses.
Or was it vehicles?
Safe house.
It was a network. It was a network of people that risked their comfort zone a little bit and welcomed people leaving captivity into their lives. And so what we want to do is underground ministries, we want to help that happen. Through One Parish, One Prisoner, and also through coffee, opening up networks with Fidalgo coffee roasters. Does anyone know Fidalgo coffee roasters? So they've taken on underground coffee that we started in the basement at Tierra Nueva years ago. And so now there's 3 full-time employed with benefits people that are formerly incarcerated. One individual formerly incarcerated for 27 years. And they're doing great, and they want to push this coffee way out there as a way to start conversations, and as Fidalgo coffee roasters, to embody and invite other employers throughout Skagit County to say, hey, this is working. These are some of our best employees. They're really smart, and they kick butt, and they go for it a lot faster than some of the millennials who look more like me, who are looking for their next Twitter break. These guys are really working. And so how do we create structures to invite and incentivize and reward and celebrate employers that want to be part of this underground employment network? And we can start by buying underground coffee. It's at the co-op right now, learning about underground employment network. Are there any employers in the room tonight?
In retirement, I think.
Oh, in the sheriff role.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about starting up any business in your next job?
He's already got one.
He's already got one. So we'd like to start these conversations. At the very least, Buying the Coffee can start a conversation about there is an underground, and how do we be part of that network, whether it's parishes, and I'm waiting for groups who aren't even churches yet to be like, hey, we're a small political group in Anacortes. Can we embrace someone coming home? And our answer would be yes. And so we want to continue these conversations within our community through employment, through parishes, but primarily about relationship, because that's where we get involved. If you get enough churches and groups that have a relationship with one person, they see everyone who's incarcerated differently. So I just want to close with talking about someone at the Presbyterian Church, who's one of our, Mount Vernon Presbyterian, who's part of our pilot One Parish, One Prisoner groups. And this individual came home and loved him. They wrote letters, and he came to the church, and within a week or so out, he relapsed. He went back to the streets. And the whole church, though, started asking for weeks. I'll call him Jaime. Where's Jaime? Where's Jaime? And it went from a sad note to me to a really musical sound. That I had a church, not just making small talk, but asking a wonderful question. Where is this person? That there's a hole, the shape of that individual in their community. That now as they think about addiction, as they think about incarceration, as they vote differently, they pray differently, because they began a relationship with someone who's out there in the underground still. And so if we can have that kind of effect in our communities, I think the whole divide, whether they're the concrete walls of prisons we need to dismantle over time to get back to something more sane, but even the walls of fear and not knowing one another in our community, we want to bridge that with relationship. So thanks for having this time.
When somebody gets cold, I'll close it.
Took out my coat.
I'll just stand here.
Sometimes it's a rock outside the door.
I don't mind standing here.
Okay, we don't have a huge crowd, but that'll make a more intimate, interesting conversation. So, who has the first question or comment? You can have a comment. And just, if it's a question, say which one of the speakers it's for. And you can include Cruz. He's staying up here to answer your questions. And you might say your name so everybody can get to know you, because we have a couple of new people tonight, so they want to know everybody's names too. Rosemary.
Chris, you said that you have a new program going on. Did you describe it during your talk? Because I didn't know the difference. And how do I sign up for our church for a prisoner?
I didn't plant that question. I'd love to talk to the all-day Unitarian Universalist Church or Fellowship. That'd be great. Let's stay in touch. We have a sign-up sheet in back, and just put interested in OPOP, OP, and that would be great. We already have begun a relationship by talking with you all, and we're starting to figure out a pathway towards preparing a congregation that has 5 stakeholders. It needs to include the pastor, so there's full support from the leadership, where they go through a training with us and start writing letters. Just 5 people, but we think about it like 5 fingers of a hand before the embrace of the whole body. 5 people that are in primary relationship and communicate to the rest of the community.
Rosemary's the one who thought of inviting Chris. So you can thank Rosemary that Chris was included. Were you next,
Yeah, I have
Charlie?
a question. Yeah, I'm Charlie Wilson. I'm new here. Moved here from Woodinville and Santa Fe. How does an individual sign up to do what you're doing? Is there a place for that?
We're still learning, and we need more capacity, more staff to think about the best and strategic ways to involve folks. Right now, you can sign up and on a list in back, and I can be in touch with you outside of this evening. But one thing that we do want to do is really connect individuals, maybe as writing relationships. But there's a lot of guys who are not getting out soon. So I would want to pair parishes or churches with people that are coming home in the next 2 to 5 years. But I know a lot of guys that are doing 20, 40 years to life. So I might be interested if you would want to build a pen pal relationship with someone who's going to be down for a long time. And there's kind of a lost art of letter writing, I found. A real deep, there can be a deep intimacy and conversations that can happen in letters that can't happen in Twitters and phone calls and coffee shops. So I'm excited to pair those relationships as well with some of our elders and wiser members of the community.
I'd like to respond to that too. I've written letters to prisoners for I don't even know how long. I don't think I have a gift of gab, but I do know that hope is the biggest thing that you can do, and just being interested in someone. I never give out any information about my family or my neighbors or my neighborhood. I have a post office box through the coalition, so they don't know my home address. I speak very current events, things that we do as a family, or the garden that my husband grows, and what we put up as far as vegetables and that sort of thing. Yeah. I encourage each one of you to just find someone that Chris, I know, could connect you, and even if you don't have that personal, physical relationship with you, you can get a little bit of that through letter writing. And these guys just are so grateful that someone out there cares. And you know, Joya is always making some kind of a new poster or flyer or something, and I send those, and they're just aghast that anyone out here cares. They think that they're just complete throwaways and no one gives a rip. So just a little bit of one-on-one connection with these folks makes all the difference in the world. Thank you.
Real quick. When she says she letter writes, she's got a box, thousands of letters in there. And the information that you learn from these people, and I would encourage Chris, invite her to come down and talk to you about how she creates these relationships. She's been doing it for decades, and it really does matter. So that's just my second voice on that.
Are very many of the inmates online so that they can email back and forth?
They can. I'm the old school. I refuse to give JPay another penny.
That's one of those privateering
Yeah.
businesses
Yeah,
that makes
that's
money
right,
doing
yeah.
it.
Yeah, I refuse to do it. Many of them wish that I would, even offer to pay it, and I said, that's not the point. If I wanted to, I could spend the 5 cents or the 15 cents an email, whatever it is. It is the principle, and I refuse to give them anything. And I could use the electronic aspect to send money to a family member, friends of family, that I send $25 to occasionally, but they take a percentage of it, and I refuse to do it online. I do it snail mail. It costs me 50 cents. I'd rather give it to the post office than to the billionaires that are making incredible profits. And we didn't bring the list, but most of the large corporations that we do business with daily are invested in the private prison industrial complex. And it is slave labor. These folks earn 26 cents an hour. The corporations have no insurance for these folks. They have no vacation pay. There's no retirement. There's no overtime. And they make billions off of this slave labor. And it is not right. And when the American public finally realizes how much advantage that these corporations have taken, the bail system, the telephone system, every time a prisoner makes a telephone call outside, someone makes money on it. JPay is another. And now they have the tablets, the new tablets. Prisoners have the tablets. They were so excited a couple of years ago to be able to have a tablet where they could email, where they could get their music. It costs them for everything they buy through that tablet. It is horrific. And it only costs them $50. They get a whole $30 discount on this tablet. Yeah, because they're going to make who knows how much on the other end of it. It's really sick. And in the beginning, I was so naive that the corporations, I thought, well, I'll just become a stockholder. I'll go buy some stock from this place. You can't even be a stockholder unless you're high echelon, multi-millionaire. They keep this little group all tied up nice and tidy and make billions every year. It's just not right.
I'd like to speak to that for a second, because there's cognitive dissonance when we start talking about major corporations making money, and we're talking about people in the streets that are having to do drug deals or sleep or just try to survive, and it's like the mind can't bridge this gap. The best thing to know, have any of you guys heard of three-dimensional chess? Okay, you know what chess is. Chess is a somewhat complicated game. Well, imagine three-dimensional chess. It's where you have a chessboard here, and then you have another chessboard and another chessboard, and you can see through it, and you play all 3 layers of chess at once. Well, this system that I diagrammed here is a 27-layer chess game. And so when someone who is familiar with the system tells you something that doesn't make any sense to you, don't automatically dismiss it as not logical. She can't be telling the truth. When these guys are telling you the truth, it's probably a truth. Because, you know what? They're living in a different reality, in a different time, with different paradigm, with different beliefs. And so when I learned about the privatization of prisons, my local jail, the person in charge of the jail in Whatcom County, I said, my God, I said, we've privatized prisons and we can't be doing that. And she says, we don't have private prisons in the state of Washington. I was ignorant, I believed her. For a while, I did believe her. But then I understood that there's a difference between a private prison that is being operated by the GEO Group or some other major multinational corporation, or the immigration, the ICE, the Immigration Detention Center that is now managed and operated by the GEO Group or CoreCivic or whoever's now in charge of it, I can't remember. But there's a big difference between the prison itself being owned by a private corporation or contracted with by a private corporation and a county corporation. A county corporation is still a corporation. That corporation is in fact running your local jail. And what they do is they contract out to other private parties who provide commissary services like Aramark Industries or Alliance One or JPay, like she's talking about, or the mail laundry companies and the tow truck companies and all these companies. So every single county corporation has all these independent contractors that they do business with, and they're like quasi-government corporations. So I want to tell one quick story on that, and then I'll get out. But I had a friend who called me from jail. I didn't know anything about it. Called me, and they were in for Thanksgiving, and they wanted to get a Thanksgiving feast because they were promoted this big Thanksgiving feast thing, and they were going to be in for another 30 or 60 days. And they said, could you please send me one because I'd like to have turkey dinner. And I went, you know, that's the least I can do, the poor guy. I mean, I'll do that. Scared. I'm a typical white, privileged American woman who wants nothing at all, nothing to do with the prisoner. I don't want my name associated with it. I don't want to talk about it. I sure as heck don't want to give people that are in prison my credit card number, and I don't want to deal with the contract. I mean, I didn't want anything to do with it, but this person mattered to me, so I went ahead. And I went in and I bought him a $45 dinner, Thanksgiving dinner. It was this Thanksgiving feast. It had a really pretty banner on it. I put down my credit card number. I just bought it fast. I got in and I got out, and afterwards I went, I wonder what I bought. So I looked at the receipt and I went back in and I looked at what I bought. And you know what that 45 bucks cost me? It cost me closer to 55 bucks. What this person got was 24 bags of top ramen noodles.
Oh my God. Now remember, they're in jail, there's no cooking facilities.
How's he gonna cook 24 bags of top ramen noodles? He got 7 ounces of a turkey in a sticky bag, you know, one of those vacuum sealed bags, 7 ounces of turkey. He got a can of hot beans, like refried beans, baked beans. That was his nutrition. He got a sticky bun, he got red licorice, he got hot Dorito chips. I went through the list, and one of my industries is alternative health and healthy nutrition, and I can tell you that every single item on that list was full of MSG, toxic foods, red, yellow dyes, all this stuff. I was so mad at the end of it. And that's how we're being heisted. And no one, there's nothing that these guys inside can do about it. There's no one overseeing the privatization of the prison services and the jail services. And I was madder than a hornet, and that's one of the reasons why I've done some of this work. Because we are being ripped off. The people who are going through the system are getting ripped off. They get crazy because it doesn't make any sense. The law enforcement doesn't know what to do about it because they got to follow the law. The mental health people don't know what to do about it because they can't fix people who are crazy when they don't know why they're doing it. And it's like we got this big, I call the word snaggletooth, but we got this nightmare that's spinning around up here that we got to ground out. Right now in the nation, we are arresting 11.7 million people a year. 11.7 million go into our jail system. That's absurd. You know how many actually go to prison? Only 631 of that 11.7 million. That means that the number of true violent offenders who are actually committing violent crime that need to go to prison and get incarcerated is 631,000 people compared to 11.1 million that are simply being arrested and going through the churn, the money generation churn, and they're being traumatized and victimized, and private companies are making massive money. The medical industry is making massive money. All these service industries are making massive money. We've got to turn it around, folks, and we can do it from Whatcom County. And maybe, Will, I'm going to stick a spoke underneath you. I don't know what you're doing after you retire. But you know what? Maybe we could help. Maybe you could help us, help our community, because we are killing our children, folks. We are killing our children and we don't even know it. And I'm sorry to be depressing, but there's a lot of things we can do.
I have great hope for our future.
Yeah, me too.
I have great hope for our future. I know that we're going to turn this around because the people that I work with that don't know about this, that don't know what happens in the court, are appalled. They are appalled, and this one woman this morning, she's a beautiful young mother, and she says, I know all these people up at Westerns. I know this. I know one of the professors is just going to love what you guys are doing. So she says, I'm going to see how I can get more people here to take this training. So when people understand what's really going on, it's not going to take long. And Joy's a quantum thinker, and we're going to have a virus of good stuff going on.
Back on the Thanksgiving dinner, you mean they don't make Thanksgiving dinner inside?
Have it for decades.
That's Cruz.
Seriously, that Thanksgiving dinner is absolutely, it's typically provided by Aramark Industries. Aramark Industries is the same multinational corporation that provides food to most of the sports stadiums in the world. They also provide most of the food to our universities. They provide the commissary products in Whatcom County to the Whatcom County for our jail. They also provide all the laundry services and everything else. What they do is they make a contract, they make a deal with your corporation, your county corporation, and because they can undercut the costs, they then pay a certain commodity or a certain commission back to the county corporation. It becomes an income stream to the county. Now, understand that we've got 50 countries, our county, 50 states in our nation. We've got dozens and dozens of counties. We've got like 10 or 12 or 17 jurisdictions or something in Whatcom County of different kinds of law enforcement agencies. This is a very complex, complicated problem, and so this 27 layers of stuff, it's a big deal. But the principle is simple. We do not need middlemen making money on the punishment of our people. We do not need to continue to teach abuse, perpetuate abuse, traumatize people for abuse. We need to actually teach life-enhancing behavior. We actually need to help people get back to work. We need to build small businesses and do exactly what you're talking to. Everything that you're talking to, Chris, is exactly what we need to be doing. And we can do all this locally. So there are solutions, and I can talk more about that later.
Okay, 4 questions. Oh, back here.
Go ahead.
Bring you the mic.
Go ahead.
The guy in the yellow shirt and then Will. Say your name, please.
Yeah, my name's Gary Jones. I was wondering about websites. Does Underground Ministries have a website? Do the Whatcom County reentry people have access? I think that's a way that people can find out and maybe respond to.
Thank you.
Yeah, ours is undergroundministries.org, and that feels like a plan. Gary is the president of the board of Underground Ministries. And proud of that, man.
Thank you. Thanks so much. We've actually got 2 websites. One's called the WhatcomRec.org.
It's on the back of it.
WHAT, Whatcom REC. Reentry Coalition.
It's on the back of the brochure.
And we've also got the restorativecommunity.org. And the reason we have 2 websites is we've had real challenges trying to keep our website up, functional, and running in an era where a lot of times we get tackled by outside people who don't necessarily want our business to succeed. It's been very interesting to find that to be true. In the beginning, I didn't think that was real, but it is real. So we get tackled, and we have to continue to function. And we can use funding and support and things too. So thank you.
Yeah, a second question for Cruz is,
Yes.
what's the food like in your experience? How does that go?
I don't know. It was nasty. But that's all I can say. It was nasty. But ever since I made my changes in my life, I settled for what I get. I was thankful that I was getting fed. I was thankful that I was able to wake up and go to school in the morning. I wasn't treated the way I think supposed to be treated, but I had to put up with it. The money thing, I never had more than $10 in my account, because more than $10, it gets taken away. If somebody puts $50 on your books, they take 40 and they leave it with 10. Doesn't matter who puts the money. And if you have two offenders that are getting money from the same person, that money gets taken away, nothing gets given to you. It goes into an offender betterment account or something like that. So you don't get none of that. It took me 6 months to be able to get a job in there. I was getting 42 cents an hour. I was working 6 hours a day. I enjoyed it. You know, I enjoyed it. Doing something, keeping yourself busy, it's you know, it's comforting. But at the end of the month, payday came. It was $55 a month, and I would get $15 out of that, because the rest went to LFOs and
15, right?
yeah,
1.5.
yeah. So it'd be like $45 that were taken away. So I was able to get a bag of coffee. I never liked coffee, but I like coffee. Coffee and some cookies. I settled for that. I never complained about how much I was getting or none of that, but I know that a lot of people, I seen what a lot of other people were going through with their money issue, and it was bad. It was bad. I try not to stress about it, though. Yeah. Every time my family members would put money on my account, I would give them a call and say, "Don't do that again, because I'm not getting anything." They're like, "Well, why are they taking the money? It's my money. It's not your money." I said, "Well, tell that to them. Well, there's nothing I can do, you know." A few times there was people that were putting money in my account and my nephew's account, because my nephew was in there too. And all I would get was a letter saying that not to do that again, because I'm not getting anything. So, you know, I got a Christmas package here and there. I try not to ask for a lot for the family members, because I knew what I was doing out here was not, you know, was not good. So I try not to bug them a lot. I burned all my bridges with all my family members, and I'm getting all their trucks back. I'm able to see my kids now. I'm able to, I got help from Underground Ministries getting my license, my social security card, my birth certificate. We're working on getting a job right now. I recently got accepted into what's called a trust house, and I have dreams now. I have dreams. I don't know if you guys are religious, but Jesus says that unless you become like one of the little ones, that you won't be able to see the kingdom of heaven. And I want to become one of those little ones. I want to be able to have dreams once again, like I did when I was a little kid, you know. But just like the little one, if you don't grab them by the hand and guide them, you know. And that's why I enjoy being with Chris. I wrote him a text in the middle of the night saying, "I love you, bro. I feel really blessed." And I thought he would be sleeping and see in the morning, but he texted me back saying, you know, "I love you too." So I feel great.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, the sheriff has a question or comment? Probably.
Yeah, just I sitting here, I got all kinds of things I could comment on and questions and stuff, but, and if the folks are interested, I would certainly be happy to say what we do in Skagit County in our jail with privatization and what we do and what we don't do and those kind of things. Happy, as time allows, I'm happy to talk about that a little. But the question I had, and maybe I'm wrong for Irene and Joy, but I got the sense that you were saying Whatcom County, of course, we know they got their measure voted down to get their new jail twice. And I got the feeling you guys supported that.
Absolutely.
And
to fail the jail
right.
tax.
And I guess I'd like to hear just a little bit about maybe some discussion between you guys and Cruz and Chris. I'd just like to hear some interaction between you folks, because my thought, when we were overcrowded, just like Whatcom County was overcrowded in their facility, and we were overcrowded here, we passed our measure, we built our jail, and we're doing some, I think, in some things, some really cutting edge programs, some certainly expanded what we were very difficult able to do with our crowded jail. And I think, Chris, I'm sure you could attest to this, that the difficulty of just you getting into our old jail to visit somebody for 10 minutes was a process. Whereas I think it's much easier now. It's easier to get in, there's more room, there's more with more privacy to speak with people. And I'm just wondering if you think in Whatcom County, are the community, are the inmates being better served by being stuck in that crowded jail and not having the opportunity to have some of these programs because the space is just not there? Or would it be better, and I know you're saying, okay, you're going to build a bigger jail, they'll just fill it up. And to some degree that might be true, but I'm just wondering if you could say, yeah, let's suck it up, let's build that bigger jail, more room, and then maybe we can do those programs that will help Cruz and will help Chris change those lives, which I think we all agree those lives need to, just locking people up doesn't work. We need to change the behavior going in, while they're there and coming out. We need to do that. And you can't do that, I'm telling you, you can't do that in an overcrowded jail where you're just warehousing people. And so I'm just curious if you guys would have a difference of opinion on what a new jail might look like.
Do you want to answer first? Do you have an opinion about it?
Or, yeah.
I think I'm going to answer, yeah, this will work. And I'm going to stand up so you guys can hear me and see me. Your logic makes total and complete sense as long as you're working in a progressive, common sense business community. When I learned about predatory businesses was when I started studying stock market trading back about 15 years ago. And I found out that in the investment and business world, you can make money on the destruction of the company. It's called a contrarian business model. It's like when you're betting on a bull market versus betting on a bear market, and you can make a lot of money on a bear market. And what's interesting about working in stock markets and trading money is that you become desensitized to what the purpose of the bet is because you're just making money. And that's one of the things that is so complicated about dealing with the jail and justice system. Absolutely, you are correct. It was the hardest thing in my life to have to stand up and run for county executive to fight the jail tax. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done because I knew I was condemning people inside that jail to more misery because they were not being treated well inside the jail. But I'll tell you what I had to do is I had to realize that if we passed that jail tax, we were going to be building the beginning of a 2,400 bed immigration detention center out in the county. And people would sit there and they'd look, how can you do that? How could you jump that? It's because I looked at the business model, I looked at the business plan, I looked at the prospectus, I looked at the needs assessment, and I realized that the county sheriff, the prosecutor, and the executive, and know that I'm not saying anything out of school here, I've told them the same thing, so I'm not talking out of turn. What I learned was that the three people in charge of the law enforcement were hooked by the idea that if they could build this prison in Whatcom County, they bought a 40-acre plot of ground. Do you know what us taxpayers paid for that property out there? We paid $150,000 an acre. 40 acres. $150,000 an acre for that real estate purchase. And 20 acres of the 40-acre property is wetlands that had to be mitigated for another $10 million. That meant our real cost, our fiscal cost on that property as a private citizen, we were going to end up paying $500,000 an acre for 20 acres of buildable land, upon which they were going to build a 2.5-acre sheriff's compound and a jail that was going to be expandable in pods from 800 beds to 2,400 beds in the next 20 years. It absolutely didn't pencil. For us taxpayers, it didn't pencil. As a real estate investor person, I'm looking at it and I'm going, this is nonsense. How in the world where did this come from? And I went and I read their needs assessment and they didn't even have good statistics. So I had to look back and I started studying the statistics. Where did the studies come from? Where did the money come from? Who paid the jail planners? And the jail planners were getting $10 million to build our planning projects. And they were running on flawed statistics that the sheriff had given them. And the sheriff stood up in a meeting and said, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to give them those stats. So then I had to start going back and say, how do you do this? And I started doing research on how the jail was being overcrowded in the first place. And what I found is that our jail was being overcrowded because of administrative glut done by the prosecutor, the sheriff, and the jail manager, who were not letting people out of the jail. They were over-criminalizing, over-incarcerating, and stuffing the jail. I ended up writing a report on how they were stuffing the jail. The matron, woman in charge, had taken us from, I think we had a third good time to down to a quarter good time on inmates. They were a sixth.
From a third to a sixth.
A third to a sixth on good time. They were actually increasing. Our average length of stay in the jail went from 9.7 days to 22 average length of jail, which means the amount of time that you stay in the jail. That's a contrarian number. Our cost of operating the jail had grown and our costs, our budgets in Whatcom County had grown by 3,000%. That's an astronomical figure. It doesn't add up. And then I started to go back and started studying the budgets and looking at what's going on, and I started doing more research. And what I found is that we had a person who's in charge of the Washington State Reentry Board, the Washington State Jail Industries Board. His name is Marvin Wolf. I used to work for him 30 years ago. He was a master at three-dimensional chess. So I got into his head and I started thinking about this as a business industry at the border of the United States. We live in the deep north. We've got 13 entry points to Canada and points international. And I realized that we are a target of an immigration detention facility. And then I started looking at real estate investment habits and what's going on in the real estate investment industry and the prison industry. And it was the largest, fastest growing investment industry by people who build on contrarian business principles. And I had to stand up and say no. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done, because I know people living in that jail and they don't deserve to be in there. And so what I did is I started looking at how do we replace it. And I built a business model that explains how do we downsize the prison industrial complex, how do we return people to work, how do we get people out of jail within days, within hours, and put them to work doing things that can rebuild their lives, doing free enterprise projects, building a local living economy instead of an economy that is codependent upon taxpayers to build bureaucracies. So you asked, and that's my answer.
I guess my short answer to your answer is I couldn't disagree more with you.
Disagree?
I could not disagree more with some of your thoughts.
Let's have a debate at another time. I'd love it. I would honestly, because you asked the question. Do you know what? Most of our officials haven't asked the question. Do we have other things that are going on? Yes, we are arresting people and they're going through massive trauma and we're creating mental illness. Do we have bad people on the streets? I don't disagree with that either. We have awful people on the streets. One of the reasons I voted for the last 5 sales taxes in Whatcom County is because David McEachran was the guy that put the murderer of one of my friends in prison, Hillside Strangler. So I just believed McEachran for 40 years. I've changed my opinion because I did different kinds of research. So that's...
And I'd like to add to that. I hope I can be brief. Our prosecutor has been in office 44 years. He's retiring this year. The prosecutor is the most powerful person in the county. And he is very proud of his 95% plea bargain rate. That means that probable cause is something that most jurisdictions do. Someone commits a crime and then they look at everything else that might have happened or could possibly be, and the people on the street call it stacking of charges. And so they go to in front of the courts, and often the prosecutor will say, okay, well, if you plead guilty to this, then we'll reduce, we'll make these things go away. But what they're left with is something that they are not guilty of. But because many of them don't have bail, they have to stay in jail for sometimes a year, many, many months for many people, losing their jobs, losing their kids, losing their homes. And and that's why let me get back on track. They plead, bargain, and plead guilty to something they're not guilty of, just so they can get out of jail, and often, most often, it is a felony charge, and that goes with them the rest of their life. They are so desperate to get out of jail, they plead guilty to something they're not guilty of. And people say, how could you do that? Well, you go sit in jail and have nasty food for months on end, and see how you would, and you've already lost your family, you've probably already lost your house. So, and then the other piece is, it's been proven over and over that programs for people who are having to re-enter society are not best placed in jail or prisons. They are best placed in the county, in the community, so people can actually get on track sooner, quicker. It's far less expensive to do it in the community than in the jails. And I know we're disagreeing on a lot of things, and it's a good discussion because we all get to learn.
Okay, there's a question over here.
I'd be curious what Chris feels
Oh, yeah.
about my original question.
Yeah.
And you may surprise me, but I
I did not hear the original question answered.
Repeat the
I heard Sheriff Reichert just asking about, as Irene and Joy have dedicated a lot of energy into opposing the new, larger jail in Whatcom County, whereas here in Skagit County, we passed a bill and have built a new jail. And there have been some improvements that the Sheriff is naming. Is it possible, he was just curious, their thoughts, could it be maybe improved conditions of life for prisoners in Whatcom County? And Joy was very articulate about some of the larger factors, whereas maybe, in her opinion, it's a bad idea. So I'm hearing Sheriff Reichert's question about what is my thought on that
just
comparison?
your perspective, if the new jail is actually weighing the pros and the cons, is it actually a positive or a negative?
I haven't been around as much in the new jail. There's definitely some improvements. It's better lit, it's more spacious. One of the things that Joy first said that I resonated with is that oftentimes larger jails just become bigger warehouses, just a bigger mouth into the machine. But why I supported, with qualification when I speak with Charlie about the new jail, is because I trust Charlie. I trust that he is coming from a mental health and a public health perspective, and that he was going to build a box that was really going to help people not go deeper into the machine, but to get better, to help our most unwell community members. But I think it would go county by county. I really trusted Charlie. But even then, a lot of the things that he really wanted to happen, I saw getting compromised as budget changes, and then the 8th draft of what the facility looks like, things that we were promised didn't happen. But some good classes are happening, and I think it has a restorative mission to the facility, and I hope that continues. I don't know if that's true for every other proposed facility. I don't know if that helps.
No, and I would agree, that is the key right there. If you just have somebody saying, I'm just interested in warehousing more people, I'm not sure that maybe does answer the questions that we all want to solve. But if you have somebody that's committed to, okay, we need to expand this, and we realize jails can't be everything, and can't be a mental health facility and all those other things that are out there that need to be there. Jails can't answer all those questions, but if they can be a part and a help to that, and the people running the jail are committed to that, I think a facility that allows that to grow and nurture those inmates in that regard, I think is a positive. And I think Whatcom County could benefit from that if they were committed to doing those things.
Well, I want to
and I believe they are. And that's maybe where we disagree.
I want to thank you for hiring Charlie Wen and making him chief of the jail, because his perspective in that facility is important. So it just makes me want to all the more learn about sheriffs as I learn about who gets to hire the person that runs the jail and designs it. So thank you.
I'm going to pass around basket for money, and Chris has this sign-up sheet, So if you look at the sign-up sheet and sign up if you'd like, and so that's why I'm going to be interrupting.
Good idea to pass the sign-up sheet along with the hat. Okay, Jeff, stand up and say your name.
Jeff Mount, I applaud what the sheriff has been doing to make life better in the prison, but it is a false choice. There's two ways to relieve prison overcrowding. One is bigger prisons, and one is fewer prisoners.
Yeah.
And there's
He's so smart.
there's a lot of people that go through the system that just don't need to. And I know by the time the sheriff's involved with it, it's probably a lost cause, but just the prosecutorial system that they go through, we could do better on that end, so, and then we wouldn't need a bigger prison.
Well said.
I'd like to speak to the question of what you guys did in Skagit County. You approached the problem completely differently. And you also hadn't just built a brand new prison. We've built 2 brand new jails in the last 30 years in Whatcom County. We passed 5 sales taxes to build those 2 jails. We went from 180 beds or 200 beds to almost 350 beds, and then they were going to jump to an 800-bed jail plan without a proper needs assessment. There are so many things that threw up red flags. That's why we started investigating, and we found problems in the logic, and we found problems in the flow. And the prosecutor at one point, he said this. He came to a meeting and he said, serious crime has gone down 25% in Whatcom County over the last 10 to 20 years. Juvenile crime went down 80% in the last 20 years. That's why we need to build a bigger jail.
I'd like to, I just want to add a little bit about the jail. Our jail, well, the Division Street Jail, which is for work release, is 10 years old. Our downtown jail is 30 years old. Our city hall, Bellingham City Hall, across the street, is 100+ years old. Why is it in 30 years we need a brand new jail? The jail has been in disrepair for over 10 years. And there have not been proper repairs done, and I believe that it was left in disrepair so that they could go out and say, we have an overcrowding problem, we have, and absolutely, they have systems that have failed. But, if you have a leak at home, you don't let it leak, you fix it. And so I have a lot of questions about the disrepair of our jail. And another thing that our county executive was really proud of when they were stumping the jail, he said that they were asking for over $100 million to build this jail, and that over 30 years, now this was not a tax, this money that he was talking about was not going to come from this sales tax that they were, but it would cost the county of Whatcom $1 billion to just run this facility over 30 years. That would bankrupt our county. $1 billion over 30 years. That's another reason why we oppose the jail. So there's something going on, there's something not right, and we have done a lot of research, and Joy has done this mapping process and has brought us to a point where we can turn this around so quickly when the masses understand what's going on, and we can change it very quickly. And I'm looking for the virus, by the way.
Okay, Barbara.
Two things that struck me. One is that we haven't talked at all about women in jail, which is a problem, I would think. The other thing is that jails have become a mental health facility. I've read several things, and in my experience as a nurse, it's the same. There's no really place for mentally ill people a lot of times when they're violent or they're in crisis. And so jails have become something more than just jails. They're actually a mental health facility, and we're expecting our police to be trained to be mental health professionals, and they are being trained, But that's something that I was hoping you might want to address as well, because I think until we deal with what do we do with people who are maybe thinking about being violent or are violent, and on top of it, they're mentally ill, and they end up in jails, and I think that's why you end up with them in jail for so long, because there's no place else for them.
That's very true.
So how do we address those two issues?
The women's issue it's the next expanding, and see, you gotta understand, I'm talking from a contrarian market right now, and understand that 30, 40 years ago, I was in the jail business, or in the security business. I work in the field. The women is the next big commodity market for expansion of the prison industrial complex. That's a bad idea. It's good business from a contrarian business perspective. It's a bad idea from a social justice perspective. That's what I'm going to say about that. It's a problem. The mental health problem is a worse problem. And in Whatcom County, this was another reason why we stood up against it, because our county, because our budget has gone to pay so much money into law and justice, we went to a 70% of our budget. That means it used to be 55% back in the 80s. So what does that mean? That means that we went from a larger percentage of money going to mental health, going to public services, going to senior services, going to planning, going to healthcare. And in the last 15 years, 30 years, that completely flipped upside down. So there's no money there, even though we passed 5 sales taxes and are bringing in about $20 million a year more. And so what happens that happens? We have to start looking at it. And there was a day that I called Irene and I said, well, what are the mental health services that we have in Whatcom County? And she said, there's this and this. And I said, well, what about this? And what about addiction intervention? And what about the treatment centers? And what about this? She said, those are all gone. And I said, but we used to have them. And she said, yeah, they used to be there, but now they're not. Whatcom County is the second from the bottom in Washington State for providing mental health and social services. And Washington State is 47th in the nation in providing mental health services. That is a dismal record, and yet we are investing massive money in the abuse pattern. We're not investing in prevention. It is a philosophical shift, and it's not the problem of the people who are running the facilities necessarily. This is a psychosocial, economic problem of philosophical proportions that we have to deal with, and someplace you gotta draw the line in.
Yeah. This morning I went to the county jail to Skagit to put some money on somebody's books. It was a $20 bill that I borrowed from my mom so I can put it on somebody's books. Because I know how it feels to be in there. I looked up the name on the machine, JPay machine, I put the money in there. The name came up. I get a text like 2 hours later saying, hey, I went to jail. I said, I know you did. I just put money on your books. And he's like, well, I'm not there no more. He goes, I go, well, why is your name on the JPay machine? They're like, I don't know. I go, can we get that money back? He's like, well, I'm gonna call them. And the answer they got is like, JPay is totally different and it's another company. You'll probably get a check in the mail or something like that. So I was like, all right, just let it go, dude. You're out, you're good. And going through the jail roster, I see my brother-in-law in there. He suffers from schizophrenia and paranoia. And he doesn't have a release date. He's in there for indecent exposure, and he has a habit of taking off his shirt and his belt. He never takes off his pants, but his pants are always hanging because of the belt. So he's doing, I don't know how long he's gonna be in there for, but he's got schizophrenia and paranoia. He's been on Social Security for ever since he was a little kid. It's not something that because of drugs or nothing. He's been on Social Security and he's going to this place called Compass Health. I don't know if you guys heard about it. But I seen his name on there, and he has no release date. So I thought about going back over there and maybe writing him a letter and putting, $20 on his books. He has no other family, or his other family are drug users. So, but yeah, I just thought you guys might want to know.
Thank you for your remark.
It's interesting, you could look at a list of everybody that's in there?
The jail roster.
Public record.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things to understand is we all want to take care of people. The police are in the business because they want to protect. Everybody's trying to do the right thing. I just think we have a messed up system that we need to fix. Go ahead.
I have a sheet here. If anyone wants to sign up and receive our newsletter or just get in contact with us, maybe volunteer or talk about what you might do here in Skagit County.
Rosemary.
I wanted to ask Cruz a question. I was a teacher for 30 years, and I wondered what the schools could have done that would have helped you to avoid prison. Was there something that was missing, or?
I think the school did a pretty good job with me. Even though I was born here, I was raised in Mexico, in Juarez, and Juarez is just a total disaster. But when I got here, you know, I looked around and I seen grass. That was like the main thing. I seen soccer balls in people's yards not being washed or bikes and stuff. So I'm thinking, man, this is weird, you know. I had some pretty good teachers in school. I didn't know a word of English. I had to learn from kindergarten stuff. I was already 12 at that time. Audiobooks, pictures, and all that stuff. But I think the school did a pretty good job. It was not until I got to high school when it got out of control. I think the high schools are now paying a lot of attention to the students. Well, to me, it was just they would call my mom and dad saying, well, he didn't show up. Other than that, they never really reached out to me and say what's wrong, what's going on at home or something, you know. But I think the school did a pretty good job with me. So, yeah.
Anybody else?
Any other questions?
I've got the handout.
Hi, I'm Teresa Baker. I guess my question is for Joy. You're the one with all the stats and figures that are amazing. I mean, I know this stuff in a general way, but some of the numbers are just
Talk into the top of it.
so
That's
astounding
like, yeah.
that I can't believe it. And I'm wondering, do you speak at legislatures or on the national level? Do you have a presence where you can present this? I know that, you know, we have new legislation being proposed right now for prison reform and sentencing reform that may pass. And I'm sure people have spoken in front of committees, but I haven't heard some of these facts before. And I wonder, the numbers are so astounding. 11 million people arrested. I mean,
It's incredible.
it's something that needs a national presentation, really. I mean,
Thank you for asking, and I am going to go national. I didn't go national until I started to do enough analysis. I had to do case analysis of local problem. We have a serious problem in Whatcom County. And I grew up Republican, I grew up very conservative. I grew up believing that, man, you're a bad guy, you do the time, get out, all these things. It has been a huge mind bender for me to have to put my mind around this and understand it. And when you have a national problem, 11.2 million people, think about that. That means that taxpayers are paying about $35,000 a year in taxes to house 11.5 million people. If you are using that as the cost of bureaucracy in the state on average. In Washington State, we actually pay $75,000, I think it is, per year to house a prisoner. At $75,000 a year, we could actually be investing in jobs, in apprenticeship programs, in preventive medicine. We could be really training people and getting a far better return on investment to the taxpayer dollars. But that's not the real money problem. The money problem is this. Not only does it cost $75,000 to incarcerate them and hold them inside an expensive jail facility, I think it's the University of Kansas did a secondary study on what is the cost, the ripple effect of a person who gets incarcerated on the family members and the secondary and tertiary costs, like suicides, health, divorce, extra cost to the family taking care of them. And there was an 11 times factor on the secondary cost. That's $75,000 a year that we're paying out of pocket in taxes. That's 11 times that. What's 11? Let's say 10 times 75,000. That's $750,000 in taxes paid to state and federal government services. And then when I did the study on Whatcom County taxpayers that I just completed, and I reported this to the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force this morning, I just did a study on 53 people, and I interviewed all these 53 people on what happened to them or their family member. It was actually 79 people. And what happened to them from the point of a 911 call through the point that they actually got through the system, made it through probation. And what I found in the mapping, I tracked everything that they talked to me about, and I tracked the cost to the family. And the average cost of any person who gets arrested is between $10,000 and $30,000 that they pay out of pocket, not in government cost. They pay this out of pocket to private interests of one kind or another for these various kinds of services just to be able to get through their first case. Some people paid $100,000. That's a lot of money. And I don't know of any middle-class person who could come up in this next year or two and come up with $10,000 to $30,000 to try to get themselves out of a pickle because they caused an accident or, they got in a fight with a neighbor. I mean, these are preposterous figures. 11 million times 30,000 is a lot of churn in the economy, and that is what's driving our economy right now. And so we really need to look back at that conversation and figure it out. I will be writing a book on what I've learned. Because I think the good news, okay, it sounds really dire, but the good news is we can change it. 30 years ago, we actually had conservation corps. We actually did have dog training programs in the prisons, and we still have some of it, but it's been scaled back. We did have Western State, we did have Northern State, we did have, some of those things were wrong, but we had many solutions. 4-H was something I grew up with. Boy Scouts, all of these kinds of family networking. There's restorative justice programs, there's restorative circles programs, there's conflict management programs. And if you go look to the Washington Policy Institute and you start looking at the fiscal management numbers, you will find that doing things like EMDR training for cognitive dissonance healing between the left and right hemisphere of the brain, you can get a $45 return on investment that's positive. But if you put somebody in jail, it can cost you $150 a day, what's Bill charging now, $125 a day to house somebody in the Whatcom County Jail. And yet you can go to Yakima and you can get the same deal for $75 a day. And they give you better good time. So it's an economic problem with social underpinnings, and we do need to talk about it. And there are solutions. There's a whole pile of them. And I invite you, in the back of the table, there's a bunch of things we can do in any community to go back to the old farming methods of taking care of your community, old Grange halls, old neighborhood relationship building programs. There's a lot of stuff we can do, and we can de-escalate the costs. And then we can apply all the programs that you're talking about. We do need jails. I'm not opposed to a good jail. We do need them. For the people who must be in jail, we have to have them, and they need to be treated humanely. I don't have a problem with that. Sorry.
The legislation right now that's being proposed, that only affects federal sentencing guidelines, correct?
I don't know, there's hundreds of initiatives and legislation, so which one are you talking
Jared's
about?
bill, basically.
I'm sorry, Jared?
Jared Kushner's reforms, that's all just for federal sentencing. But in terms of fixing things like what you're referring to, is there like a state legislature approach to it, or is it just county by county?
Every single county, every single city has different laws that they enforce. Those cities have to put their felony people typically into county jails. So you've got contracts between cities and municipalities, county jails, you've got contracts between all these things. So there are legislations that are passed on many, many, many levels. the federal issue that Kushner just came up with, or that Trump's trying to push right now. On the surface, it looks really good. Let all these guys out that have been biased against and this and that and the other thing. So on the surface, it looks like maybe it's a good idea. I actually don't think it is, and unless they uniformly apply that across the cultures, because it's not just the blacks and the Asians and the Hispanics who are incarcerated. That's true, there are racial bias issues, but there are privileged bias issues which underscore that. And every single person who is being unfairly incarcerated should be released, but they should be released into a program and into a method in the community where people can be helped to go back to work, like he's talking about. These guys are talking about it. Mentor, help, bring them in and help them learn how to rethink, because they have been conditioned to think in ways that don't work in a free society. So yes, we do need national conversations. I will be writing some books and some training materials. I'm a real proactive person. I want to put people back to work. I've got kids and grandkids that I got to deal with,
So if we want to agitate on a legal basis, would the first step be like the county commissioners, would you say, in order to get it real reform?
I think so, yes. But I think, the best place to agitate? Go talk to your sheriff. Go talk to him and find out what's actually happening here, because you know what? You're doing some good stuff down here. And what you did when you built your jail made sense in Skagit County. Had we done even close to that in Whatcom County, they would have had a different outcome. But they didn't do that. They did something completely different, and that raised flags. So you go talk to your prosecutor. You go talk and learn about the systems from all these different people, because it's neighbor to neighbor that we're going to make changes, and then work state and national as well, if you can.
I'd like to say something. When you talk to your folks that are in power, in the office, don't talk to them just once. Don't talk to them just twice. And go listen to them when they speak in public, and pay attention to what they say. Because it took me a while talking to some of the folks that were in office before I realized they said one thing one place and another thing a different place. So just, yep, and I heard it again today. So just be aware, be very, very cognizant of and take notes so you can go back and compare your notes. It's really important.
And listen to what statistics mean, because they mean different things to different people.
Oh, and they shift.
They twist.
The statistics shift. So like I say, take notes. And I want to go back to our county jail. There are, I think the number is 1,500 empty jail beds on the west side of the mountains in Washington. So had Whatcom County built their 500 and some beds, that would have added to the empty beds. And the reason Bellingham, by the way, is shipping, they were told by the sheriff that they had to take all their misdemeanors, that's people with no felonies, out of the jail, out of our county jail. So they found Yakima, and they charged $65 per bed, per head, per person, per day. And where was I going? And the reason they have these beds for rent is because they overbuilt their jail. They have empty beds that they now need to rent so that they can pay their bills, so they can pay the mortgage on that jail. So there's so much that we public don't know. And then the other thing that I'd like, and I'm shifting now to the state DOC, Department of Corrections, prison. When people come out, Cruz, did you get an identi card when you released, or were you released with your offender badge?
Do you have the offender badge?
Yeah. Yeah. I have one in my purse. I won't bore you with it. But in 2000, I started writing Chris Gregoire, then governor, in 2009, about the people not being released with the proper identification and paperwork when they release from prison. In 2010 and 11, Joy and I went to Olympia. It took us 2 trips before DOC even showed up. They were supposed, the Department of Corrections, Department of Licensing were supposed to meet with us because we wanted to get to the bottom of why people releasing from prison in Washington State are not released with an identi card. Most people can't have a driver's license because, as they were explaining earlier, they have fines that they can't have, or they can't have a driver's license until the fines are paid off. But an identi card is a Washington State ID. People releasing from prison now are released with their prison prison offender badge. And DOC says it is not it's not identification, but it's the only identification they're released with. It has their badge number. The number is still on it, and it says offender on this badge.
It says Department of Corrections.
Offender.
Offender, and you've got your prison ID number.
Yep, that's what they're released with.
And a check.
And a check for $40 that they can't cash because this offender badge is not one of the 4 IDs that the bank will accept. So it's been really hard for me because I love America. I love my country. But when I get more and more of this information, I'm becoming more and more angry and disappointed because I've learned, I have deduced that what we're doing with our folks is warehousing them for profit. And the corporations that Joy spoke of earlier are disgusting, she says. I agree. So these are some of the things that we can work on. You were asking what we can do, and we talked to Senator Carroll, who's no longer with us, bless his heart, and he was the only one of 50 people that responded to my email, and he wanted to get this ID thing ended for all. He wanted everybody to release with an identi card. And we talked to the techs of both Department of Corrections and Department of Licensing, and the 2 of them got together and says, you know what we need? We need a $34,000 one-time software program. We need to develop this program so the 2 of us can talk to one another. And then instead of making a brand new card, which they do a week before someone is released, and then you sign that card, right?
Yes.
That's the only difference. The one they wear every day isn't signed. So they make a brand new card for them just before they release that they can't use in society. So instead, let's make an identi card that probably doesn't cost any more and release them with something that will not be a barrier to their success. This is a barrier. And New Jersey has this litany. It's a long list of things that they they have in a pack that they give to the folks before they release. It even has their rap sheet in it. They have their Social Security card. They have everything that will help them be successful when they release from prison. That's what Washington State can do. So I'm hoping to be able to talk to someone in Olympia. I went to the Universalist Summit in Edmonds last month, and they have some good people working there. So I'm hoping we can at least get this part done so that people can it's easier for people to be successful. You can't get housing, you can't get a job, you can't even cash your $40 check. So, thank you for listening.
On that note, when we added it up and we went to the senator and talked to him, and we got the DOL and the DOC to come together and talk to us, the administrators, the tech people, said $34,000 one time, we could fix it, we could be issuing people identi cards upon exit. A piece of cake. The senator said, it looks like we're gonna have to run this through a budget. It's actually, $34,000 is a line item fix. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, as an executive, they could do a line item fix at either the DOL or the DOC and fix it. You know what it costs us? Our estimate when we were talking to people, us taxpayers, when we were talking to people about how many people are probably fail the system, go back and recidivate because they don't have proper identification, he guessed 25% or something. He said it's probably closer to 50 or 70%, but let's just use 10%. And it was like millions of dollars is what we as taxpayers are paying to reincarcerate people who fail back into the system because they cannot get a proper identification. And who better knows who's in that prison at exit than the people who have them held there? Who else is going to give them an identifying badge or tool if they can't find their social security number, if they can't find all this history, their birth certificate? Who's the one person who owned their body when they put them in the prison? The state owns the body and they own the identification, and they could admit and let them out with an ID. That's the least we can do for our citizens. And you know what? It has been years. And when this proposal at one point finally went through, the state says, oh, we'll run a pilot project and see if it's a good idea. So it cost us thousands more dollars or tens of thousands more dollars to run a pilot project. They said, yeah, it worked. Last year, it still wasn't passed as a legislative action, and all we need is somebody, like if you want to go talk to somebody at the DOL and say, hey, how are we going to fix this problem? Because it is an administrative decision, it is not a legislative problem. Other states have fixed it. We can do it too.
Sorry, isn't it up to DOC then, not to DOL?
Well, it's a connection between the two, because there's Homeland Security requirements on certain rules with regards to making these proper kinds of badges, because they have to have certain security things embedded. But the DOC already has those computers. It's just a matter of the DOL releasing the proper information to the DOC. It's stupidity. It's just stupid. And they let it go.
It sounds like they have these offender cards in the first place just to,
That's right.
just to humiliate them, the expelled or ex-prisoners,
You mean when they release or when they're inside?
when they release.
Yeah, I mean, that's a conclusion.
I
No conclusion I can draw.
Well, it does not allow them to enter society in a harmonious way. So.
Oh, we've gone over time.
Big surprise.
Surprise. So let's thank our speakers. There was Our next meeting is going to be January 9th, or 8th, Tuesday the 8th, right here. The topic, we don't know yet. We'll decide Friday.
Thank you all.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.